Hello, everyone. My name's Orion Lenz, and you're tuning into the Outabox Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. This is where we discuss the latest and greatest in the art world, both on and off campus. Well, it's the first episode. Light your candles, unwrap the presents, and enjoy this show. You know, hopefully the audience out there can appreciate some of the more dry, the more restrained type humor. So anyway, it's the first episode. Wow. You know, I never thought that this would happen. Not to say that we're not confident about the show, but I feel that we can do stuff that will, create great memories on campus and off. I mean, because we got some great guests lined up for the show, and I'm just super excited to tell you about them because, they're just all so very interesting. You know, they've all got their certain projects that are unique to them, and they're doing on their spare time, and it's a creative output unlike any other show you'll find on the internet. I guarantee it. Okay, maybe that's not certainly true, but we're definitely trying. We are going to keep that competition up, aren't we? Yes. So anyway, because this is our first episode, I'd like to introduce the format of the show to you guys. First off, we got Homegrown Greats. This is a student showcase segment of the program where the interviewer, me, asks questions about the specific skill/talent that the interviewee possesses and what they hope to achieve with their work. You know, this is this part of the program where we actually interview you students out there that have those great ideas. Second, we got Creator Baiter, a showcase of outside artists, which are outside the campus, that we find interesting on the web or some other place. So it's the same format as before, but just with a different guest, someone who is outside the campus. And then third and lastly, we got We Create, Therefore We Are. Yes, this is going to be an in-depth discussion on a specific art subject that connects to multiple outside topics. This can just be me rambling at the microphone for about 2 hours, or I can have a guest on. I think you guys would most likely want to have a guest. Believe me, you don't want to hear me talk for 2 hours. It gets pretty frightening. So I think the plan is that we'll be planning to do at least 2 of these 3 segments per episode. This can vary with any amount of planning that we have, but for the most part, we are going to stick to 2 out of the 3 per episode. Who knows? Maybe for some episodes we'll have only 1, and then for some we'll have all 3. I don't know. It's just however the episode works out. Well, there you have it. You got that introduction. You know what's coming up on the show. And without further ado, let's get right into our program with Creator Baiter. Well, we've managed to bait quite an individual for our show today. He is the genius/prodigy/madman that has managed to write over 18,000 songs by 2016. He has taken upon himself to write a song about literally anything that you can think of, from household objects to popular celebrities to even a whole album of insert name here prompt proposals to be used at your convenience. He's used over 70 different aliases to promote his songs, all specific to their subjects such as paparazzi and the faux tags for celebrities, the very nice, interesting singer man, and the guy who sings your name over and over again. And the man behind the mystery is here with us now. Please introduce Matt Farley. Welcome to the program.
Hello. Thank you so much.
So anyway, to start off, is there anything that you want to clarify about the description that I gave? Perhaps maybe an estimate of how many songs you've written since then?
My current total songs that I've released is 18,728.
And I'm sure there's more to come after that. It's just going to keep building on itself. It's just the creative output is more prolific than dealing with this man.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hit 19,000. I've been at 18,000 longer longer than any number, because I've had 2 kids in the last 3 years, so that's made life a lot more busy.
So anyway, just to start off for listeners that might not be familiar with the background, perhaps a brief history of Matt Farley / Moshaven and Motern Media.
All right. So Matt Farley, I grew up in Massachusetts. I still live in Massachusetts. And as a kid, I just really liked music and movies, and I felt compelled to make music and movies as soon as my family got a video camera. My friends and I were making movies, and as soon as I got a 4-track cassette recorder, I was recording songs. And then in college, I met a guy named Tom Scalzo, and he was into songwriting, and so was I. So we just started writing songs together all the time, and it was so much fun. We loved doing it, and we thought we were great, so we just kept doing it. And we'd written hundreds of songs by the time we graduated, and we called our band Moshaven. And then we kept doing it after college. We would meet up for like a couple, for weekends, a weekend-long recording sessions. And it was tons of fun, and we came up with some good stuff. Then we started releasing it, and almost nobody listened. We could release it on iTunes and later on Spotify, and nobody was listening to any of the songs, especially the good songs. The ones that were like traditionally, solid, straightforward, poetic, good songs. No one listened to them, but people did listen sometimes to the weird songs, because we'd write serious songs, but then we'd write goofy stuff. And so I noticed that if you wrote a goofy song that had a goofy title, you might make a little bit of money off it. So after Tom moved away, he moved to New York, so we weren't able to collaborate as much. Starting in like 2007, 2008, I just decided I'm going to write nothing but goofy songs with goofy titles for the next decade and see what happens.
Yeah, and I think that the story goes that one of the first terms that people started looking up and finding your material was a song with the word monkey in it. Is that correct?
Yeah, we had a song called Shut Up Your Monkey, and it's about a loud monkey. And yeah, who knows? Were people searching for the George Michael monkey song, and then they just scrolled down a little bit and they saw Shut Up Your Monkey and thought, what the heck is that? I don't know exactly, but Shut Up Your Monkey was earning us about $2 a year. And again, that's not a lot, but I just so happen to be a songwriting machine. I'm like a factory of music, and I could sit for 16 hours just recording music nonstop. And I was like, well, I can make enough songs that if they each earn me $2 a year, that's going to be some real money. So that was my game plan.
Yeah, and it just seems like it progresses from there. I mean, just doing that on top of itself for years is going to just produce so much more and be so much more prolific in that sense.
Yeah. So because the songs, a song that I wrote 10 years ago is still earning what it was earning 10 years ago. And sure, it's not a lot, but when you have 18,000 of them, it's pretty, it's enough that I can afford to keep doing it. So, and that's the ultimate goal, because I just love doing it. And, it's my full-time job now, so I'm happy.
Yeah. Just a quick question about the Moshaven. Is that at all reference to The Simpsons and all, because it has the kind of the Moe's Tavern type half in there, but you replace it with Haven?
Unrelated. I think maybe we thought about the fact that people might think that, but it was not our intention. Pink Floyd is a combination of like 2 of their favorite like blues singers, I think. The name, like someone Pink and someone Floyd, and they just took those names, put them together. So we did that with Richie Havens, except we dropped the S. He's like a folk singer from the 60s. And Mose Allison, he was like a jazzy songwriter from around that same era, maybe a little earlier. So we just threw those together. It just had a good ring to it too.
Yeah, so that's interesting that it actually isn't like like the place Haven, but it's based on Richie Havens. That's an interesting little fact.
Yeah. And, we'd been for a while there before we would record albums and make album covers and put, and release our version of releasing an album meant making 2 copies, one for him and one for me, but we bothered to like make the album cover and liner notes and everything. We were really into it. And we would change our band name with each album until we finally settled on Mo's Haven.
Yeah, I mean, doing like when you're in a creative project like that, it seems like doing all that little detail work, like the minute like liner notes and everything like that, designing the cover is just so fun to do. It just expands the imagination of the project so much more.
Yeah, I think that no matter how big the project might be, you need to approach it as if it's important, Yeah, you don't say like, who cares? No one's gonna hear this. Like, no, let's make this thing and let's make a cover and let's go through the whole process because we love this thing and it's giving us nothing but joy, and it's good exercise to approach it with that level of seriousness.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I think if people appreciate that, all that little detail work, where they can kind of find clues as to what the lore might be behind the songs, and it's not everything has to be surface value. You can kind of chisel away at what's going on as far as the story goes. Yeah, and I find things are misinterpreted too, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. You make stuff, it means something to you, but it could also mean something else to the listener, and that doesn't change the value, I don't think. Do you have any examples of that where you find that people misunderstand what you're writing about? I mean, there's plenty of people. Let's see. The most recent example I can think of is a song I just released called "A Nod to the Gods," and the refrain is, "It's the Q document. It's the argument from ignorance." And the Q document is something to do with theological research. But someone on Twitter asked me if I was referring to a queued document, like a document that was about to be printed on a printer. It was like queued up to be printed, And that guy had listened to the song a bunch of times thinking that that's what I was singing about, and it didn't take away from his enjoyment. Yeah, and that seems to be the story with a lot of popular music. I mean, just think of "Born in the USA" by Bruce Springsteen. It's like people thought that was a patriotic song, when in reality it was kind of just commenting on the Vietnam War. So I guess to each their own. Yeah, and that's fine. That's fine because it's an individual experience. It's you can try. The songwriters got their individual relationship with the work, and then the listener, each listener has their own individual relationship. And I mean, I'm more than happy to tell people what I was thinking when I wrote it, but that does not necessarily make my interpretation more valid than theirs. Yeah, and just going back to the detail-oriented side of writing these songs, I mean, you find songs like I Think Tom York Is Crazy, where each lyric is kind of referencing a different album of Radiohead, which to Radiohead fans, it's like, oh man, he's actually taking this part and that part from each album and put it in. It's building that sort of puzzle is kind of interesting to me. That you can have hidden references and everything that people who might know will actually get. Yeah, and I think that's also the little success I have has a little bit to do with the fact that I'm actually giving the people what I say I'm giving them. Like a lot of people will put out instrumental tracks that have like catchy titles that refer to either famous people or just whatever, like a title that makes you think, "Ooh, I want to hear it." But then you play it and it's just an instrumental track, and you're like, "Oh, I kind of wanted to hear the singer sing about this topic." Whereas, I Think Tom York Is Crazy is exactly about that, and I think people appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely. So, since you've written so many songs, I mean, 18,000 is quite a lot. it must be interesting to know how you actually come up with the songs that you're going to write each day. What do you think is your method of coming up with these ideas? And do you ever forget a lot of the songs that you write? Do you keep a list of them, or do you? What is your method on keeping track of yourself?
Every song. I think in albums, so it's a little bit easier to keep track of the songs because mostly each album covers a certain theme, So I might not specifically remember my song about hot dogs, but I would know that it's probably on one of the food albums, obviously, So I definitely it's fun listening to myself because while listening, I will think to myself what I would sing here, and then I will hear myself sing that. It's not that I remembered the line; it's just that I think the same way as the singer because I am the singer. But my way of writing is to have a bunch of song titles written out ahead of time. So while I'm watching TV at the end of the night, I'll have a notebook in front of me, and then I'll, whatever I was planning to write about. Okay, I'm doing an album about flowers, so let me write down every type of flower. And I do that in a notebook, and then that means the next day I'll come downstairs, open up the notebook, and be like, okay, I got to sing about a dandelion. Let's get to work. That's the best way for me. I don't want to be at the piano not knowing what to do next. I want to always have a new assignment right in front of me.
Yeah, because it can get draining. I mean, it's so daunting to sit at whatever instrument that you're trying to create with that, you just kind of get lost in your own mind. It's like, oh crap, what am I going to try to formulate musically next? I think that's a good method in kind of systematically saying what album that you're going to do next, just based it on a general idea, and then from there you can think of 1,000 other different ideas. I mean, since it's all under the same general topic that you're working on.
Yeah, and it also worked. I write a lot of really silly novelty songs. My song about hot dogs is not gonna win a Nobel Prize for literature. It's silly, but I do also write some good, just honestly good, straightforward music. But that approach works for that too. So I can be more abstract about it. But oftentimes, if I'm going to be doing just an album and that's a work of art that isn't a thematically silly, a silly thematic album, I just want to make a good album. So what I'll do is, again, up on the couch watching TV, if someone says a line on TV that's interesting to me, I'll just write it down until I have 90 different little phrases, words and phrases that I just heard, or my wife will say something and I'll just be like, ooh, let me write that down. And I'll have all these words and phrases in a notebook. And then when it's time to work in the album, I'll just look at the list. All right, what's the next phrase? Let me write a song that either that's the title or I use that phrase in the song or something. It's a good way to prevent writer's block.
And I think, actually, that's interesting that you mentioned the notebook because I don't know if you heard, but I think that's what Elvis Costello does. He actually carries a little notebook around when he goes to the cafe or the restaurant or something, and he just, whenever an idea or a phrase pops into his head, he can just write it down and write a song about it.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah.
It's just it seems like it's a very stream of consciousness way of formulating what you're going to write about. And in my opinion, I think that makes it a heck of a lot more creative in that sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, smartphones are great for that too. I have several notes files open in my note app, for different album ideas. And then if I'm taking a walk or just doing anything and then the idea pops in my head, quickly write it down in there because otherwise it'll vanish. And then I'll be like, wait, I had an idea, but what was it?
Yeah, and it seems like I usually get ideas from just going out in the open and just looking around. It's like, oh, there's something going on at this corner of the street. It's like, hey, that might be an interesting story behind it.
Yeah, but it's amazing how quickly it can vanish from your brain, if you don't write it down. I think, at least. You're like, sheesh, I had the best album of all time, already written in my head. I can't remember any of it.
Yeah, exactly, actually. I mean, that's the frustrating part about it, is that you do have those days where you wake up, and it's usually like you feel a certain way too. Like your body is kind of like just in a naturally good mood already, and in a naturally productive mood, and you just think, oh my gosh, I have just I'm going to change the world with what I'm writing. But then, if you don't take the effort to write it down or to at least organize it in some way, it's like, oh my gosh, what did I actually write about? This thing that I was so excited about is now gone.
Yeah, you got to act. You got to act. And I mean, my approach is that if I'm always, if I'm down in the basement every day working on music, then I'll just be here. I'm here doing it whether I'm inspired or not. But when I do happen to get inspired, there's no lag time between the inspiration and acting it, because I'm already down here.
Yeah, and I think doing it systematically too must help. I mean, just getting into the habit of writing songs every day. I think that's the important thing about it, is that it's so habitual at this point that it gets easier and easier with each day. Do you feel that way, that it gets easier with each day, or are there still some days where it's just drudgery?
Yeah, I mean, yes, of course, there's some drudgery days, but yes, the more you do it, the more you can do it, the more you'll get done in a shorter amount of time, and the better it will be. Just keep on doing it, and maybe early on, for every 20 songs you write one good one. But, a few years down the road, maybe it's for every 15 songs you write one good one. And also the ones that aren't necessarily great could still have value of one sort or another. So that's why I release everything, because a lot of my songs, I don't even know if they're good or not, because the ones that get complimented are oftentimes not the ones I thought were the best.
Yeah, and so in addition to that, what do you think is this persona that you probably get the most traffic with?
The Toilet Bowl Cleaners is one of my pseudonyms. It's a band. I'm the only member, but I pretend that it's this band of guys that sing about poop, puke, and pee. And they are by far my most popular band. The Poop song on Spotify is creeping up towards 500,000 streams, which is just amazing. All I do is sing the word poop for a minute and a half, and it is by far my most popular song. I mean, by hundreds of thousands of streams more than the next most popular one. Because kids, I had an idea, a stroke of genius one day when iTunes was around. I was like, you know what? I betcha kids type the word poop into search engines. And turns out I was right, so I have hundreds of songs about poop, puke, and pee, and they're my most popular. Not the poetry. I write real poetic works of Bob Dylan-esque genius, and no one listens to them. But the poop songs, big hits.
Yeah, and it's just like, oh, bananas. Let's see what comes up with the bananas. It's just kind of a fun game, and I think that's part of the fun aspect of it, is that, you kind of play a game with yourself. It's like, oh, let's see what can actually pop up. What's the most random thing that can pop up? Because that's what I actually started doing when I first discovered this, is that, I, being a naturally curious person myself, I get the weird ideas of saying, oh, what songs might come up if I type in toaster, or, a certain place or a certain celebrity. It's like, oh, there are all these different songs for that, and they're all connected. And that was the great thing about it, is that I got to, discover the mind behind all of this.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, that's like the ideal way that I would want someone to discover my stuff, where they're like, wait a second, that's the same voice. And then like, wait, no, that's the same guy's face on the album cover. He's using a different name, but it's him. Oh my God, he's everywhere. This is crazy. And then you like go nuts. That's the dream reaction.
Yeah, and just that process of kind of like gradually finding out, it's like you're connecting the clues. You're like Sherlock Holmes. It's like, oh, that does have the same voice. That is the same face. It's like, I mean, how far can we go with this world, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, just that process was really the initial discovery of what was going on. So getting back to the personas, since you said that the toilet bowl cleaners were the most popular, would you say that it's also the one that you're the most proud of, or what would you say which persona you are the most proud of?
Yeah, I'm happy with the toilet bowl cleaners, of course, and they've been good to me. But my favorite is Moe's Haven, the band, is probably my favorite because of all the cool stuff I did back then with Tom. But since then, it's definitely the very nice, interesting Singer Man. Just in the last 4 years or so, I've done about 1,000 songs under that name, and it's a journey. There's this whole story behind it that if you listen closely enough, you can kind of hear that he's this wide-eyed songwriter writing about silly, mundane things. An album called Songs About My House and Stuff, followed by a transportation album with 90 songs about cars and boats and trains and planes, and then an album about clothes and whatnot. And they're just these jolly, silly songs, but then eventually he just snaps, perhaps from having sung all these songs over and over again, just, all these silly songs, he snaps. And by the time his 8th album comes out called Common Phrases, instead of just singing jolly songs about common phrases, he's singing dark, sad, existential songs about the meaninglessness of existence. And the songs are really good too, I might say. And then he comes out with Keep Being Awesome, which isn't even, he's done singing novelty songs, and now he's just singing about how sad and lonely he is and how he's never had a true relationship with another human being, and he feels lost and alone in the universe. And I just think that is a hilariously dark journey to follow this character down.
Yeah, speaking of Keep Being Awesome, I actually turned my friend onto that album, and he actually said it was phenomenal. So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, he really likes kind of the concept behind the nice, interesting Singer Man, how he has his arc, and then he goes into the dark phase, and then now he's trying to kind of compensate with it. I mean, these songs like Read a Book, Women Make Me Sad, Never Stop Being Amazed by Life. I mean, in addition to being part of the humor, I mean, these are, at least I think, some of the best crafted songs in the repertoire. Partially because of the arrangement, and partially just because they're just catchy.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like something. I feel like something's happened. Around 2015 into 2016, that I feel like I kind of broke through a level of songwriting where suddenly it was coming a little more easily, and it was better, And I started writing stuff that was a little less mundane, a little bit more, a little darker at times, a little stranger, and I did the same thing with the guy who sings songs about cities and towns. After releasing 10 albums about cities and towns, he put out I've Never Left My Hometown, which is just like Keep Being Awesome. It's just a good album that happens to have this backstory that you don't even need to know about. But he sings about, how he lost his girlfriend because she wanted to go see the world, and he was too terrified to leave the town, cross the town line. And it's I just felt totally freed up to just kind of just write the song and don't even think about it. Just write it, whatever comes out, and I'm really happy with what came of it, and I'm riding a bit of a good wave lately that I've been enjoying.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. And the great thing about that is that I've also noticed that even with that sort of, I wouldn't say style change, but you know what I mean, where you're kind of venturing into newer grounds, at least for these personas. They still work with the algorithm in the fact that you can just type in these terms. So Keep Being Awesome, just type in awesome, or type in book, or type in woman, I mean, it still works within, the formula that we're trying to do.
Yeah. Also perhaps, I start, like no one was listening. No one was paying any attention to what I was doing from like 2008 till 2013 at least. Like I had put out like 10,000 songs in those years, and I was making money, and no one was writing about it, no one was talking about it. And then I started to get attention. Like NPR did a story on me, and Wired magazine, and several, lots of different newspapers and podcasts and TV and radio. And suddenly I was like, oh, people are listening. And also a lot of people were ripping on me too. They're like, this guy's the worst. He has no talent. He's a hack. He's just trying to make money. He's not a real artist. And I was like, what? What do you mean? And so I kind of it kind of inspired me to be like, oh, you don't think I'm a real artist? Take this. And in the last like 2 or 3 years, not to brag, I put out like honestly 10 masterpiece albums that I have a very small base of fans who appreciate it, but most people don't pay attention to it because they write me off as a hack. But hey, the world will catch up eventually.
Yeah, and you know what they say, the best revenge is success. So basically just say, okay, you want to go that route? Bam! Another 2,000 songs.
I know. And it's tough because every time there's an article about me, people just they're like, man produces thousands of songs, and they're like, well, he's not a real artist because real artists suffer for their art, and they take weeks agonizing over one line and one chord change and blah, blah, blah. But that's garbage. Lazy people take that much time to agonize over one line and one chord change. Real artists are working working hard, and people aren't really agonizing over the line. They're just goofing off, and then they come back to the line after goofing off for 2 weeks. It's not like they were really thinking about the line for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. If you ever hear any stories of professional artists in the studio, like they're always, messing about. I mean, they never get around to recording until like they're the worst procrastinators in the world.
Yeah, and I mean the whole system. Once they're successful, they can be so self-indulgent, and like keep doing like. I think a lot of other people get bogged down in getting the sound absolutely perfectly right, and doing like a million takes and getting that sound right. When in fact, you're not making the song any better. Just record it, get it done, get it right, but it doesn't have to be perfect. I think perfection is uninteresting too.
Yeah, and the thing is, what you think of perfection is, like you said, and what you've realized before is that other people are going to find, the songs that you don't think are that good. They might think that they're great, and so you never know at the end of the day.
Yeah, or you could have a version of a song that you finished on Monday, and then you could take it and tweak it, to get it perfect for the next 5 days. But then you play both versions for someone else, and they don't even know the difference. They don't even hear all the little things that you did to touch it up. So don't bother is what I say.
Yeah, and speaking about that whole mentality about kind of criticizing that sort of output that you've been getting a lot of, well, maybe not a lot of, but a considerable amount of blowback for. Like, I mean, this goes into the whole argument about Spotify and whether or not that artists should be using it to promote their music, which I think it shouldn't matter either way because they're already getting enough money. At least the very popular artists are already getting enough money from concert sales and other means. So I think it's a little futile on their part to sort of complain about that when they're already getting so much more in other means of the business.
Yeah, well, I mean, popular artists are getting a lot of money from Spotify. I mean, it does pay. And, I mean, Ed Sheeran is just bringing in so much money. It's unbelievable. I don't think we hear him complaining about Spotify, and that's great. Good for him. People like it, and he deserves it. It's a lot of people who thrived in the old system who are mad because they can't overcharge for an album anymore like they used to be able to. So I think the new system is better. It's better for the consumer. You know, I used to spend $20, $30, $40 every month just buying CDs and records and tapes. You know, because I love music and I just wanted to hear stuff. And oftentimes I'd buy a CD for say $15, take it home. I wouldn't even like it. It sounded bad. And nowadays, it's like musicians can't trick me into wasting money on their album anymore. Now I can listen to it, you know, for $10 a month on Spotify. And if their record is good, I will listen to it so many times that they'll earn more from those royalties than they would have earned selling a CD. So it rewards quality, and it's more fair to the consumer. So everyone's got to quit complaining.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it definitely seems more merit-based on, at least in my perspective. I mean, you probably feel the same way then.
Yeah, it's entirely merit-based. Because if the song stinks, then ultimately, in both systems, you're trying to lure someone into listening to your music. You know, in the 90s, you were trying to lure them to buy a CD. Nowadays, you're trying to lure them to hit play on Spotify. But nowadays, once they hit play, then the song's got to be good enough that they continue to explore your catalog or to replay that song. So it's got to be good. But in the old days, all you had to do was lure them to buy the CD, and then basically you don't care if they like it or not because you've already earned the money. So, I mean, the incentive is different now.
Yeah, and it seemed like that they really wanted to put all the money into the single, so that would be kind of its form of free advertising. Well, not free, but the most effective form of advertising to buy the record.
Yeah, and the rest of the record didn't have to be good because people didn't have other than going to like Barnes and Noble and putting on headphones, if where you could preview some albums, that was like amazing technology. When I first saw that. Other than that, you don't have any. You don't have any. You didn't have any choice back then. So life is much better now, and Spotify. The other thing, artists are mad because they're not getting tons of money, but most of those people signed with huge companies that invested tons of money to promote them, and naturally, those huge companies are going to take back a lot of the money that comes in naturally. So it's like, look, if you want 100% of your income, don't sign with a major label. And if you sign with a major label, quit whining.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, if they wanted full autonomy of their product, then they should have just never signed to begin with.
Yeah, and if you are signed, then you're really lucky because you got chosen, and you're gonna have your face plastered on posters, and you're gonna have your music played on the radio. You're so lucky. So quit whining. Oh my goodness. I don't know. Luckily, it's not an issue because no record companies want to sign me. But I don't know what I'd do if they ever wanted to, because it's like it would be nice to have a big push. But also, I'm super proud to have done had the little success. The little success I've had, I totally did it by myself, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, have you ever considered maybe doing like a local tour or something? No. I mean, if I had enough fans that people would come out to see me, I'd consider it more. But it's such an undertaking, and then you perform in a venue and there's like 6 people there, and it's like, what is the point? So once a year, though, I do an extravaganza around my birthday. Next year it's going to be on June 2nd. It's here in Danvers, Mass. I'm doing a 5.5-hour concert. It's going to be awesome. We did it last June on June 3rd, and we got like 30 something people to come from as far away as Seattle and Toronto. People came from all over, and we had
such a good time. It was like a Motern convention. So I would go up with my friends and we'd perform like a 40-minute set, and then we'd hang out with all the people for a while. Then we'd go do another set and so on. And it was great. So once a year I'll do a show. That's it, though.
Yeah, and that actually sounds really cool because you actually get to interact with the people who have come out all that way, to see you perform. And, you can be intimate with your fan base at that point. You get to hang out, talk, really joke around. I mean, that just sounds like a pretty ideal situation.
It was so cool, and it was the best because after the last song in each set, yeah, everyone's clapping, and then I'd say, "It's time to socialize." And so, like, everyone knew, like, oh, I guess, Farley's telling us we have to socialize. So people made lasting friendships, and everyone is pumped to do it again next year. Yeah, and then we had I didn't even know until later, but have you ever heard of the musician Dan Deacon?
Yeah, I've heard of him. I can't think of anything that I've listened to, but I've heard the name.
Yeah, well, he came. He and his friends drove up from Baltimore and came to the extravaganza. And it was only after the fact that he tweeted about it, and then people who were there were like, wait a second, Dan Deacon was there? And it was like, there was one guy who's a huge Dan Deacon fan, and he saw him at the show, and he was like, that guy looks like Dan Deacon, but of course there's no reason he would be here. And then he was like kicking himself for not asking him about it. But that was a pretty cool thing to learn about.
Yeah, it's like, what? That is Dan Deacon.
Yeah, I mean, like he told people he made music. He's like, "Hi, I'm Dan." Like, "Oh, cool. What do you do?" "I make music." "Awesome." But he was humble enough not to be like, "Yeah, I'm a nationally known indie artist who's opened for huge bands." So that was really cool.
Yeah, I think it would be just unfortunate for anybody to lose that sense of intimacy with, your fan base. I mean, and that's kind of really the bittersweet aspect of being the most popular artist. Like, I mean, there's so many people that like you that you can't, just even for your own safety, you can't interact with them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the thing. It's like, but I feel like a lot of people who get that big are really courting it. They really want that. Because you don't have to play huge stadiums, and you don't have to pay publicists to get you in magazines and everything else. So if you actually have modest aspirations, I think you can live a great life of a middle class artist who gets to just live pretty much anonymously, but still is making money off music. So all the big superstars who complain about how they can't live like a normal person, they're lying. They love it. They think it's great.
Yeah, like I actually do kind of see that as well. Like, I mean, I guess it's part of their publicity to try to be more intimate. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think that it is kind of just a show on their part, because for the most part, I think that they do like the fame enough where they're willing to compensate that.
Yeah, and if you have all the money in the world, why are you playing a gigantic stadium where the sound is awful when you could just play like a 500-seat little theater or little club and it would sound great? I mean, what difference? Like, do you need to have $89 million instead of $55 million? Like, I don't know. It's so strange to me that if the minute I was that rich, I'd be like, oh, good. Now I can afford to scale down and do stuff that's cool rather than like this. Just keep getting bigger.
Yeah, I mean, man, tough decisions on if you're rich. I mean, you eat with a gold or diamond plate.
Yeah.
Tough.
It's something seems to happen to people when they get super rich that they just it becomes the new normal to them, and then that desire just creeps back in, but it's just a different level. Like, instead of desiring to be a millionaire, now you're desiring to have hundreds of millions of dollars. And then I don't know if it's inevitable, but I'm willing to try and find out for myself.
Yeah, just take the ticket, go on the ride, just see what happens. I mean, and that's what basically is going on right now. It's just you're putting out all that stuff for just to see if people are listening to it, just for the curiosity.
Yeah, and and then the other thing is like, forget about the money. Just knowing that anyone's listening to my music is such a thrill, and I'm so honored, and I think it's wonderful. You tell me your friend listened to Keep Being Awesome, and I'm just like filled with excitement, and I want to I want to interview him now. I want to interview your friend for like 6 hours and ask him question after question about his experience of that album. And, he would have to admit, like, oh, I only listened to a few songs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure he's working on it, though. He's chiseling away. It's an
album. It's 76 songs. It's 2 hours long. So that it's dense, but I'm really proud of it.
Yeah. So, actually, kind of just a random question. Going back to the concert thing, is there ever going to be a chance we're going to call it Mostock?
No, we call it the World Motern Day Extravaganza. That's the name of it. And we're gonna stick with that because I created a holiday on June 3rd every year. It's World Motern Day. That's my birthday, and the goal is to get everyone on Earth to just listen to my music all day. It hasn't worked, but it is a good little promotional thing I do every year. And I definitely get a big boost in streams on that day and the days leading up to it and after it. It's just one concerted effort to try to get everyone on board. And I pick up some new fans and some old fans discover songs they didn't know before, and it's fun. So now, in addition to everybody on Earth streaming the music, then also we put on the show too. So it's like this whole extravaganza.
Yeah, I feel like you guys need to infiltrate like Times Square or something, where you just put your image on the billboards and stuff. It's like, oh, we gotta get everybody on for Motern Day.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. You put it out there and you hope it'll catch on, word of mouth. Just the right people will think it's interesting and blog about it and talk about it and tweet about it. Blah blah blah. Give it a try. And if it doesn't work, oh well. If it does work, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and I think that the best part about it is that if you keep listening to the works, I mean, you start to get the humor of it, and I think that's the most satisfying part, at least for me. Just having someone out there that has this sort of the same weird eccentric type of humor, where it's like there's actually someone who's writing songs that, oh, if I type in a random term, whether it be anything that I can think of, there's going to be a song for that, and I just love that. I just love that someone is actively participating in that type of output, just for my own sake.
Yeah, it's good. I think I know exactly what you mean. It's like it's good to know Matt Farley's out there chronicling every aspect of modern life with a little ditty for each one of them. So, and when you say about the humor, I think. Like my humor is a little bit subtle. I guess when you're singing about poop, that's not very subtle. But nevertheless, I do find that a lot of some people's reaction seems very humorless. And that they just and I see it a lot. Like maybe I'm sensitive to it because it's about me, but a lot of people online do react quite negatively with what I'm doing and with no humor. So. It does take a little time to kind of figure out what I'm doing if you're not already on that wavelength.
Yeah, well, there's always room for converts, I guess. I mean, we'll keep trying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there anything else that you want to add since we're kind of coming up on our closing time? Anything that you want to say to our listeners at UC Merced?
Okay, a couple things. One, I think if you're trying to be creative with things, try to always finish the project that you're working on. Even if you think it's bad, if you've lost your love for it, if it's fallen apart, if it's not what you thought it would be, just finish it anyway. And then before you move on to the next thing, because getting into the habit of not finishing things is a bad thing, I think. Next, I think physical activity is very helpful and important, both to your general health and your creativity, because when your body is doing something like that, it allows your mind to kind of be free to roam, because a portion of your brain is making you walk, is doing that, and it gets into that rhythm. And once you're in that rhythm, then then your creative part of your brain can really soar. So I take lots of long walks. I'm a big fan of taking 5
same.
15, 20, 30-mile walks sometimes, just like walking until my feet are just blisters. And I think that's a great way to kind of come up with ideas. But like we said earlier, make sure you have your little your notepad or your smartphone to jot down the ideas when they come.
Well, anyway, thanks for coming on the show. I hope that you had a good time.
Yeah, well, there's nothing I like better than talking about myself, so I loved it. Thank you.
This program runs as a service of Fourth Cinema, an organization of the University of California, Merced. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram to learn more.